For 40 years, he sat in darkness, the blind watchmaker. 72 years old, hunched over tiny gears, springs, screws, working by touch alone. People walked past his shop, never looked inside, and when they did, they pitied him. Poor blind man, how sad, what a shame, invisible. But when a customer brought him a broken watch and Robert Chen's fingers touched the mechanism inside, he froze. Because this wasn't a watch, this was a bomb. IRA design, 1970s, 15 minutes until detonation. And the man they pitied, he was British Army, explosive ordnance disposal, 30 years of service, 800 bombs, disarmed, Belfast, Iraq, Afghanistan, classified operations. The blind watchmaker, he'd saved thousands of lives, and now he had 15 minutes to do it one more time, blind, with only his hands, his memory, and 40 years of darkness. This is his story. Part 1. The Invisible Man. March 2024. Chen's Watch Repair, London. Every morning at 8 a.m., Robert Chen unlocked his shop. 72 years old, completely blind, white clouded eyes, gray hair tied back in a ponytail, worn brown cardigan with patches on the elbows, and hands covered in scars, white lines, burns from explosions. The shop was small, tucked away on a quiet street in East London, between a Pakistani bakery and a Vietnamese dry cleaner. The sign above the door faded. Chen's Watch Repair. Since 1984, most people walked past, never noticed it, just like they never noticed Robert. Inside, the shop was a time capsule. Hundreds of clocks covering every wall. Grandfather clocks, cuckoo clocks, pocket watches in glass cases, all ticking, all perfectly synchronized. Robert could hear every single one. That one's 2.3 seconds fast, he'd mutter, walking to a clock on the far wall, adjusting it by ear. Perfect pitch, perfect timing. His customers were few, mostly elderly people who still wore mechanical watches. Mrs. Patterson brought her husband's pocket watch every 6 months. He gave it to me before he died 50 years ago. Robert would clean it, oil it, good as new, Mrs. Patterson. She'd smile, leave a 5-pound tip, and Robert would never mention he didn't need the money. He just needed the purpose. But his hands, when Robert touched a watch, his fingers moved differently, each fingertip reading the mechanism like Braille, but more, feeling the weight distribution, the tension in each spring, the exact angle of every gear tooth. Bomb disposal hands, trained for 30 years to feel everything, to miss nothing, but nobody knew. Part 2. The customer. March 15, 2024, 2:47 p.m. Robert was working on a vintage Rolex, 1960s, beautiful mechanism. When the bell above the door rang, Robert looked up. Not that he could see, but he listened. Footsteps, heavy boots, male, approximately 180 pounds, mid-50s, walking with purpose, military gait, but something else. Hesitation, anger, barely controlled. "Can I help you?" Robert asked, his voice soft, British accent, but underneath, a hint of Irish. From his mother's side. "I have a watch," the man said, his accent pure Irish, northern, Belfast. Robert's spine stiffened. "What kind of watch?" "Old, family heirloom, stopped working. My grandfather's, from the Troubles." The Troubles, that word, Northern Ireland, 1960s to 1990s, IRA, British Army, bombs. Robert said nothing. "Can you fix it?" the man asked. "I can try. May I see it?" The man placed something on the counter, a wooden box, 12 inches by 8 inches, heavy, oak, old. Robert's fingers traced the edges. Heavy, oak, old. Robert's fingers traced the edges. Heavy, oak, old. Robert's fingers traced the edges. Brass hinges, a small lock, May I open it? Pause. Please. Robert lifted the lid, and the moment his fingers touched what was inside, his entire body froze. Metal casing, cylindrical, 6 inches diameter, 12 inches long, wires running along the side, a pressure plate on top, a timer mechanism, vintage, mechanical, and a sound. Tick, tick, tick. Not a watch, a bomb. Robert's face didn't change. Years of training. Never show fear. He kept tick, not a watch, a bomb. Robert's face didn't change. Years of training. Never show fear. He kept his expression calm, professional, but inside, his heart was pounding. This is a very unusual mechanism, Robert said carefully. Yes, 1973, Belfast. Do you recognize it? Robert's fingers continued examining. Mark Three IRA design, mercury tilt switch, pressure-sensitive backup, anti-tamper on the primary detonator. Silence. How do you know that? Robert closed his eyes. Unnecessary, but a habit, because I've disarmed 47 of these. More silence. Then, the man's voice, colder. Do you know who I am? Robert tilted his head, listening. The breathing pattern, the voice, tone, the rage underneath, and then a memory. 40 years old, a courtroom, Belfast, 1984. A young man screaming, "You destroyed my life. You took everything," as they dragged him away. 22 years old, sentenced to 20 years. Liam, Robert whispered. Liam O'Connor. Silence. Complete. Oppressive. You remember. I remember your voice from the trial. You were 22. Bomb plot. St. Mary's Primary School. 200 children. You arrested me. I did. You took 20 years of my life. I did. Liam's voice, shaking now, with fury, with pain. And now, I'm taking yours. Robert's fingers, still on the bomb, feeling the timer, the mechanism, active. How long? Robert asked quietly. 15 minutes. Activated the moment I walked through your door. Pressure trigger on the threshold. You try to leave, it detonates. You try to remove it, it detonates. You call for help, I have a remote trigger. I press it, it detonates. Robert nodded slowly. And you? I'll be 4 blocks away in 13 minutes. Far enough to be safe, close enough to hear the explosion. Liam walked to the door, his hand on the handle. He stopped, turned back. You destroyed my life. Robert took my 20s, my 30s, everything. You took my sight? He paused. No, you lost that in a different explosion, but you took my freedom. So now, I take your life. The door opened, the bell rang, and Liam was gone. Robert stood alone in his shop, surrounded by ticking clocks, and one very different ticking sound. He looked down at the bomb, at his scarred, blind, 72-year-old hands, and whispered, "All right then, one more time." Part 3. 14 minutes. Clock ticking intensifies. Heartbeat sound. 14 minutes remaining. Robert's hands trembled just for a second. The adrenaline, the fear, the memory. But then they steadied, because 40 years ago, he'd made a choice. When the last bomb had exploded, when the shrapnel had torn through his face, when the world went black, he'd promised himself, if I survive this, I'll never let fear control me again. And now, blind, old, alone, he kept that promise. His fingers began to read. The casing, steel, cold, 5 millimeters thick, riveted at 4 points. Standard, military-grade construction. Mark Three. Definitely, probably, 1972 or 1973 manufacture. The wires, he counted, by touch, texture, thickness, 6 wires, insulation, rubber, aged, brittle. He couldn't see the colors, but he remembered. IRA protocol, standard, across all Mark III devices. Red, main power. Blue, ground. Yellow, primary explosive primer. Green, backup primer. White, timer circuit. Black, detonator. 15 minutes. Robert walked to his workbench, slowly, counting steps. 7 steps. His hand reached out, found his toolkit, precision screwdrivers, wire cutters, needle nose pliers, and his old toolkit, the one from his EOD days. He'd kept it for 40 years, never thought he'd use it again. He carried both toolkits back, set them on the counter next to the bomb. 12:47 minutes. Part 4. The Disarm. Tension music builds. Robert's fingers found the screws. 4 of them. Phillips' head. Rusted. Need to remove the casing. Expose the mechanism. He selected the screwdriver by feel. Number 2. Phillips positioned it on the first screw and turned. Screech. The screw frozen. Rust. 40 years of corrosion. He applied more pressure. Slowly. Crack. The rust broke free. The screw turned. 1, 2, 3, 4. 11:58 minutes. The screws removed. Robert lifted the top casing carefully and set it aside. The mechanism exposed. His fingers traced every component. The timer, mechanical, wind up like a clock. 11 minutes, 53 seconds remaining. He could feel the tension in the spring. The detonator, black wire, connected to a blasting cap, embedded in the explosive. C4, approximately 2 pounds, enough to destroy the shop and every building within 50 feet. The anti-tamper, a secondary circuit, connected to the black wire. If I pull the detonator without disabling the anti-tamper, it triggers anyway. 11:15 minutes. Robert took a breath. Okay, priority, disable the timer, then the anti-tamper, then the detonator, the timer circuit, white wire. But there was a problem. He felt a connection between the white wire and the yellow primer, a trap. If I cut the timer, the primer activates. Both must be severed simultaneously within 0.05 seconds of each other. His hands positioned, left hand, wire cutters on the white wire, right hand, wire cutters on the yellow wire. But a problem. He only had 2 hands. He needed to cut both wires at the exact same moment. Impossible unless Robert walked back to his workbench, grabbed a small vice clamp, returned. 10:22 minutes. He positioned the vice clamp on the yellow wire, locked it in place. Now, his right hand was free. He gripped the wire cutters with both hands, positioned them on both wires, yellow in the left jaw, white in the right jaw. One squeeze would cut both simultaneously. 10 minutes. Robert paused. If I'm wrong about the wiring protocol, this triggers the bomb. He smiled grimly. Well, let's find out. He squeezed. Snip. Both wires severed. The ticking changed. Slower. The timer disconnected. But the bomb still live. 9:38 minutes. Robert exhaled. Phase 1 complete. Part 5. The anti-tamper. Now, the hard part. The anti-tamper circuit. Robert's fingers traced the black detonator wire, following it to the connection point, and found a twist lock, mercury switch, tilt sensitive. If I pull the wire at the wrong angle, it triggers. He felt the orientation. The wire entered the lock at 45 degrees. I need to rotate counterclockwise, exactly 3 full turns. Then, release pressure, gradually, pull straight along the axis. No deviation. 8:45 minutes. His fingers gripped the wire gently and began to rotate. 1 turn, tick. The mechanism inside, clicking. 2 turns, tick. His hands shaking now. 3 turns, click. The lock released. Now, the pressure. He had to ease it out, millimeter by millimeter. Any sudden movement, detonation. 7:58 minutes. Sweat dripped down Robert's face. His hands trembling. He whispered to himself, steady, steady. You've done this 800 times. The wire sliding out. 1 millimeter, 2, 3. His fingers felt resistance. A catch inside the mechanism. Anti-pull trigger. Need to twist while pulling. He rotated the wire 5 degrees clockwise. The resistance released. 4 millimeters, 5, 6, 7. 12 minutes. The wire almost free. Just 2 more millimeters. His hand cramping. 72 years old. Arthritis in every joint. But he held 7 millimeters, 8. And then, click. The detonator disconnected. The anti-tamper bypassed. The bomb disarmed. The ticking stopped. Complete silence, except for the clocks still ticking. On the walls, Robert collapsed into his chair, hands shaking uncontrollably now. Breath ragged. 801. He whispered. Part 6. The call. 6:47 minutes. remaining on timer. Disarmed. Robert grabbed his phone. Voice activated. Call 999. Ring. Emergency services. This is Robert Chen. Chen's Watch Repair. East London. I have a disarmed IRA bomb. I need bomb disposal and police. Suspect is Liam O'Connor. Released 2004. He's 4 blocks away. Waiting. 10 minutes later. Sirens. Police. Bomb squad. He's 4 blocks away. Waiting. 10 minutes later. Sirens. Police. Bomb squad. In full gear. They entered the shop. Saw the disarmed device. The wires cut. The detonator disconnected. Who disarmed this? The bomb technician asked. Robert raised his hand. I did. The technician stared at the blind man. At the bomb. You're joking. I'm not. Another officer checked Robert's records. On a tablet. Robert Chen, former British Army EOD specialist, 1976 to 2006. 30 years, 800 successful disposals. He looked up. But you've been blind since 1984, correct? How did you? Robert smiled. My hands. Part 7. The arrest. 4 blocks away. Liam O'Connor sat on a bench, watching his watch, waiting for the explosion. Boom. But it never came. Instead, police surrounding him. Liam O'Connor, you're under arrest. Liam stared. He disarmed it, but he's blind. The officer smiled. Apparently, not blind enough. At the police station, Robert sat across from Liam in an interrogation room. Liam looked at him, at the clouded eyes, the scarred hands. How? Liam whispered. Robert leaned forward. You think taking my sight made me weaker? It made me stronger. I spent 40 years learning to see without eyes, to feel, to listen, to understand. You spent 40 years in anger. And where did it get you? Liam looked down. I wanted revenge. And I wanted peace. We both got what we focused on. Silence. Why didn't you just let it explode? Liam asked. Robert smiled. Sadly, because I made a promise 40 years ago. The day I lost my sight, I promised I'd never let hate win. Not your hate. Not mine. Not anyone's. Liam's eyes filled with tears. I wasted my whole life. No, you wasted 40 years. You still have time to choose differently. Liam nodded slowly. I'm sorry. Robert Rumfori reached across the table, found Liam's hand. I know, and I forgive you. Epilogue. 6 months later, Robert Chen still runs his shop, still fixes watches, still blind. But now, the British Army hired him as a consultant, teaching EOD recruits how to disarm by touch when technology fails, when sight is impossible. And Liam O'Connor, he pled guilty, got 15 years. But in prison, he started a program teaching former paramilitaries about forgiveness, about letting go. I met a man, he tells them, who lost everything because of me, and he forgave me. If he can, so can you. And every year, on March 15th, Robert visits Liam in prison. They sit and talk about the past, the present, the future, because Robert Chen learned the ultimate truth. Losing your sight doesn't mean losing your vision. Losing your freedom doesn't mean losing your soul. And forgiving your enemy is the most powerful bomb disposal of all. The blind man who saw clearer than anyone. The bomber who learned peace. This is their story.
Part 7. The arrest. 4 blocks away. Liam O'Connor sat on a bench, watching his watch, waiting for the explosion. Boom. But it never came. Instead, police surrounding him. Liam O'Connor, you're under arrest. Liam stared. He disarmed it, but he's blind. The officer smiled, apparently not blind enough. At the police station, Robert sat across from Liam in an interrogation room. Liam looked at him, at the clouded eyes, the scarred hands. How? Liam whispered. Robert leaned forward. You think taking my sight made me weaker? It made me stronger. I spent 40 years learning to see without eyes, to feel, to listen, to understand. You spent 40 years in anger. And where did it get you? Liam looked down. I wanted revenge, and I wanted peace. We both got what we focused on. Silence. Why didn't you just let it explode? Liam asked. Robert smiled. Sadly,
Because I made a promise. 40 years ago, the day I lost my sight, I promised I'd never let hate win. Not your hate, not mine, not anyone's. Liam's eyes filled with tears. I wasted my whole life. No, you wasted 40 years. You still have time to choose differently. Liam nodded slowly. I'm sorry. Robert reached across the table, found Liam's hand. I know, and I forgive you. Epilogue. 6 months later, Robert Chen still runs his shop, still fixes watches, still blind. But now, the British Army hired him as a consultant, teaching EOD recruits how to disarm by touch when technology fails, when sight is impossible. And Liam O'Connor, he pled guilty, got 15 years. But in prison, he started a program teaching former paramilitaries about forgiveness, about letting go. I met a man, he tells them, who lost everything because of me, and he forgave me. If he can, so can you. And every year, on March 15th, Robert visits Liam in prison. They sit and talk about the past, the present, the future, because Robert Chen learned the ultimate truth. Losing your sight doesn't mean losing your vision. Losing your freedom doesn't mean losing your soul. And forgiving your enemy is the most powerful bomb disposal of all. The blind man who saw clearer than anyone, the bomber who learned peace. This is their story.